Hey, so today we're going to be walking through how to run a Claude agent in a Python task in Orchestra. Now, for those of you who are familiar with Orchestra, you'll already know we have a Claude task, but this is primarily for getting a kind of question, answer, chat response scenario. Whereas today we want the agent to be able to actually do things for us and make changes to things. So in order to do this, we're going to use Claude's Python SDK. Now, Claude offer both a Python and TypeScript SDK for their agent, but given we are all data people, probably more familiar with Python, given it's in pretty much all the tools we use. And for our example, what we're actually going to do is just follow the quick start, which involves creating a buggy Python file and then using the Claude agent to tidy it up for us. So how does this look in practice? Well, if we jump into the Orchestra Blueprints repo, we have this directory containing two files. First of all, we have utils.py, which has two little functions in it, nothing spectacular, but just some basic Python. And then we also have this agent.py, and this is the real kind of magic piece to this. So the main function is going to be this async function, which you'll recognize from the quick start. And if we have a quick scan of this, we can kind of tell what it does in that we have an async function that passes our prompt to the Claude agent, uses some tools to kind of do something, and then after that starts emitting the messages and returning the response to us. So nothing crazy, very few lines of code, very easy to set up. The only custom bit we have in here is a bit to do with authenticating to GitHub, because we're going to make this actually interact with our Git repositories in order to edit the code. But you don't have to do this, or you can do something completely different with this for whatever kind of task you're trying to achieve. So how do we set this up in Orchestra? Well, luckily it's super easy. All you're going to need is a Python integration. Here's one I've created called Claude Agent, just so that this is completely separate credential-wise from anything else I'm using in Python. I've connected it to GitHub, specifically the Blueprints repository, so that it can read the agent.py and utils.py that I just showed you. And finally, I have my secrets. In this case, all you're going to need is an Anthropic API key to be able to talk to Claude. And in this case, we actually want to make a pull request at the end of this with our changes. So I've provided an extra GitHub token with the extra permissions needed to open a pull request. But if you're not doing that, you don't even need that. Now, to use this integration, we're going to need a pipeline. So here's a very basic one I made earlier. As you can see, it consists of a single Python task called Fix Broken Code with Claude Agent. And we can see this task is particularly simple. You can see that I'm just running the agent.py file that we saw earlier. I'm connected to the integration we just defined. And my build command just consists of uv init and adding the Claude Agent SDK. That's it. Then in order to pass my prompt and some other information to agents.py, I've decided to set these as environment variables to deal with character escaping and things like that. But you can architect this however you want. You can store it as a file, you can pass it directly. It's really up to you. And in our use case, we're going to be taking a prompt, a list of Claude tools, and a Git repository. We're also going to allow specifying a GitHub branch, just in case we want this pipeline to be triggered on a branch that isn't main. Now, if I go to run this pipeline, this is where things start to get a bit more interesting. So if I click run pipeline and configure run inputs, you'll see it expects me to pass a prompt, a list of Claude tools, a GitHub repository, and a GitHub branch. Now, the repository and the branch are just for this use case where I'm passing it where the code I want it to review is. But the tools and the prompt are a little more Claude specific. So what are these tools? Well, these tools are things that you can say to Claude, you can or cannot use these in order to execute tasks. So in this case, we've said Claude can use read and edit to interact with files. It can use glob, which allows it to search file systems similar to you would in the command line. And it can also use bash. So this allows it to use certain bash tools that you've already installed. In this case, I'm going to use it for the git command line actions. And finally, we have our prompt, which I'm just going to walk through because it's probably the longest thing you're going to put in here. So what I've asked it to do is review utils.py for any bugs that would cause crashes and fix any issues you find. Then it gets a little more complicated because we're trying to do some git things here. Now, this isn't the only way you can do git interactions, but this is just an example of how complex these kind of steps can be in prompts that Claude will still understand. So after making all necessary changes, please follow a git flow of checking out a branch, staging these files, pushing the branch, and then opening a GitHub pull request with some details in it to show that this was edited by Claude. Finally, I've told it use the bash tool to do this. This isn't strictly necessary, but sometimes you might want to give Claude a helping hand, as these kind of workflows are a one shot in this scenario, but obviously you can tune it to however you need. So with all of that in place, let's run our pipeline and see what happens. Cool, and our task was successful, so let's see what that looks like. If we check the logs, we can see a whole bunch of stuff that's come out of Claude here. We can see which tools it's using and its smart little commentary about how it's going to fix things. And then you can see that it goes through our steps, says it's fixed some errors in the files, it's found some bugs in utils.py that might have caused crashes, and then it's created a branch and committed this to GitHub for us. So let's just check out the PR. And there it is. We can see that Claude has opened a PR. Obviously it's come up under my name because it's using my token. It's provided us a little summary of what it's done. And if we click into the files changed, we can see that it's found some issues with utils.py. It's found that if numbers doesn't exist, this is going to be problematic. And it's also fixed the get username function as well to check if the name exists also. And that really is all you need to get running Claude Agents on Orchestra. Now, obviously this is a very small example, but you could use this for tasks such as the initial pull request reviews / fixes we mentioned earlier. You could use these to, on a schedule, run through your repositories and ensure you're using all the best practices or conventions, or comb for mistakes and look for things that may have just got through other people's PR reviews. Or you could even trigger these kind of pipelines with comments or Slack messages or whatever you want and ask them to update documentation for you or do other smart things. And that really is the power of running agents, is that you can ask them to do pretty much whatever you want. So yeah, that really is all it took to get an agent running in Orchestra. Please check it out, give it a go. Look into the Orchestra Blueprints repo and feel free to use the code that's there. And let us know what you think, or feel free to show us any of the cool stuff you build with these agents. Thanks.